After 100 hours of drive time behind the wheel of a brand new Mercedes Sprinter with the all-wheel drive chassis, it's time for me to give you guys some of my impressions. What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things. Sitting right here behind me is my brand new Storyteller Classic. It is a 2023 built on the brand new Mercedes-Benz Sprinter chassis, which is a 2-liter twin-turbo all-wheel drive version. Now, previously I was coming from a pretty old chassis at this point. It was a 2018 V6 turbo diesel, single turbo there, and a lot of you guys have been asking about my thoughts on this new chassis, specifically the all-wheel drive. How does it actually feel? What's the power like? So today we're going to talk about that. Now, when we're specifically talking about the Storyteller platform, they are being offered in both the all-wheel drive and the four-wheel drive version. Me coming from an older four-wheel drive, I have over 70,000 miles behind the seat of one of those, so I have a pretty good impression of how that thing performs, what it is capable of, where you should probably back down to different obstacles, terrain, and road conditions. So let's first start by talking about the four-wheel drive chassis. With a four-wheel drive Sprinter van, you basically have 3 different drive modes to select from. Of course, regular standard 2-wheel drive, delivering all that power to the rear wheels. Then you also have a 4-high, which is technically not true 4-wheel drive. It really depends on who you ask. And then the third mode, which some people don't often know about, is a 4-low setting as well. So you have 2-wheel, 4-high, and 4-low in the 4-wheel drive chassis. Now, I mentioned that the 4-wheel drive is not true 4-wheel drive, and it really depends on who you ask, but essentially, when you put a 4-wheel drive van into 4-wheel drive, you're not getting a true power split between the wheels. My friends over at Vancompass actually did a pretty good write-up about the new all-wheel drive chassis and sort of comparing it to the older 4-wheel drive chassis, so if you guys want to check that out, I'll leave a link down below. Essentially, they found that in 4-wheel drive, you're really getting like a 33-67% power split, not a true 50-50. Of course, you don't have lockers unless you're doing that aftermarket. In my opinion, a 4-wheel drive should be able to do at least 50-50 split front and rear, and of course, if you're getting really extreme, a rear and front locking differential is great. So with that being said, moving on to the all-wheel drive chassis, this is a true 50-50 split, and there are no buttons, there are no different modes. What you see is what you get. With the 4-wheel drive, of course, you have to select which mode you want to be in, whether it's 2-wheel, 4-wheel, or 4-low. So in the event that you are off-roading and maybe you lose traction and get a little stuck, you have 2 fallback plans there to really get yourself unstuck. If your wheels are spinning in 2-wheel, you can activate 4-wheel. For the most part, that has gotten me out of pretty much every situation. I am a huge fan of the 4-wheel drive system on Mercedes Sprinter chassis, and it's really only left me stuck one time, and it wasn't even because of the 4-wheel drive. I took a bad line when we were on a trail in Death Valley. I got hung up on a big rock, and there was no type of 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive that would have gotten me out of that situation. That's where recovery gear comes in handy, and we'll talk about some more of that once I get recovery gear on this van. So on a 4-wheel drive, you get stuck, you put it in 4-wheel. If you get stuck again, you can put it in 4-low, and then that will be about the max effort that you can put onto the drivetrain to get you out of a sticky situation. The all-wheel drive, on the other hand, is just all-wheel all the time. So if I'm on a trail, generally it's going to perform pretty well, at least for my testing so far. But if I do get into an event where I get stuck, there are no other modes that I can select from. I can't like lock anything so that power is only going to the front wheels or only going to the rear wheels. So what you see is what you get in the all-wheel drive, and some people might like that, some people might not like that. The reason I opted for the all-wheel drive version is simply because it's new and I like testing new things. From my experience so far, it has been great. Now, when it comes to different driving conditions, of course, most of the time so far has been spent on road. However, I have been off road a little bit, and I have been in some pretty bad weather, including snow through Salt Lake City all the way out to Reno and Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and California. I don't have a ton of footage of this, but while we were in Lake Tahoe, we were getting dumped on. We had probably close to like 42 inches the entire time I was there. So oftentimes I was driving the all-wheel drive Sprinter van in pretty deep snow. There were times where there were unplowed roads going up to like a foot and a half of fresh snow, all powdery. This thing would charge through that. There were plowed roads that were not plowed very well, so there was chunky ice spots everywhere, hard packed snow, basically every type of snow environment that you could get into. I have been in with this new chassis already, and it performed great. This is going to be a comparison that a lot of people might not like, but it is probably the easiest way for me to describe it. My all-wheel drive Storyteller Classic mode kind of drives like a taller, heavier Subaru in the snow. If you're familiar with how Subarus handle in the snow, I would say that they are one of the best all-wheel drive systems out there, and this thing feels right on par with the Subaru all-wheel drive. It is super responsive. Of course, the van is new, so I do have some nice tires on there. And there were portions where I was even trying to have a little fun, so I would turn off the traction control, the assist, all the ESP stuff in there, and I would try to get on it and get this thing to slide out. And the all-wheel drive system just keeps this thing charging in basically every environment that I've had it in so far, which is kind of crazy. With a van this size and of course the weight of it, I would expect it to get maybe a little bit loose or feel kind of out of control, but there are a lot of other things about this new all-wheel drive system that makes it drive even nicer, in my opinion at least, than the four-wheel drive that I was coming from. So one thing that I noticed, and a lot of people who have driven the all-wheel drive chassis will notice and will probably mention to you, is the steering. The steering on the all-wheel drive Sprinter is so light in the best way possible. This thing drives like a proper Mercedes car, whereas the four-wheel drive kind of drives like a truck in my opinion, which again is not a bad thing. I would say a 4x4 Sprinter kind of drives like a F250 or an F350, whereas this drives more of like I guess a crossover SUV Mercedes. The steering is so light and responsive that it feels like it has a tighter turning radius. When you're going slow in parking lots, you can actually turn the wheel with one finger. And then when you get out onto the highways and you're going highway speeds, it doesn't feel super loose like that. It kind of tightens up, of course, because you're traveling a lot quicker. But overall, the steering experience on the all-wheel drive versus the four-wheel drive is definitely something that I prefer. I've said about a year ago when I was testing out the Storyteller Stealth that I wasn't a fan of all of the creature comforts, but after 100 hours in the driving seat behind this thing, I'm definitely coming around to it. I still prefer a lot of my things to be analog, but a lot of the creature comforts that are in this van are very nice. And then another question that a lot of people ask is about the power delivery. Is it smooth? Does it feel faster, quicker off the line? How does it feel in higher elevations? So coming from, I believe it was a 3.0 liter V6 turbo diesel up to, or down to, depending on how you look at it, a 2.0 four-cylinder twin turbo diesel motor. They are pretty comparable. I don't know the spec numbers right off the top of my head. I can pop them up on the screen right here. So that is the difference between a V6 turbo diesel, probably the four-wheel drive, versus the 2-liter twin turbo four-cylinder diesel. And to be honest, this thing does feel a little bit quicker and more responsive, not in just the steering, but the power delivery. This is something that a lot of people who have driven these will also tell you, but it feels just quicker off the line. The motor itself is a little bit lighter, but all of these vans come out to roughly the same weight. So this thing gets up and moves off the line, and I'm pretty sure it is thanks to that twin turbo setup. Where that thing really shines is in higher elevation. I have driven my four-wheel drive V6 turbo diesel up to about 14,000 feet in elevation, and if you've ever driven a turbo diesel vehicle up that high, you will know that you have to be constantly on the throttle. The minute that you come to a stop, it's going to take quite a long time for that thing to spool back up and actually give you power to get moving. So I noticed turbo lag basically all across the board, but especially when you get up into about 10,000 feet in elevation, like out here in Colorado, you're going to notice a lot of turbo lag on that V6 turbo diesel. On the four-cylinder twin turbo, the twin turbos I believe are compounding, so one of them is probably a little bit bigger than the other. And what that does is allow one to spool up quicker, basically eliminating turbo lag. It's not completely eliminated. You do feel a little bit of lag like you will with basically any turbo vehicle, but it is a night and day difference between this setup and the older setup. Now, I haven't had the Storyteller Classic all the way up to 14,000 feet. I believe the highest I've been so far is somewhere around 12,000 feet. But even when I'm crawling over mountain passes up in the Sierra Nevadas or over here in Colorado, even with the weight of the van right now, with all of the modifications that I have going on the inside, there will be a little bit more on the outside coming soon, but it feels really good. I never feel like I'm struggling to get up hills. I can also overtake cars pretty dang easily, and that is just another reason why I'm really liking the all-wheel drive. Now, another thing that a lot of people are curious about is the gas mileage on this new chassis. All-wheel drive, new motor, all of that stuff. I picked this van up in Birmingham, Alabama, drove all the way to Colorado, then to Salt Lake City, then to Reno, Nevada, then to South Lake Tahoe, California, all the way down to Las Vegas, Nevada, across to Los Angeles, over to Phoenix, up through Monument Valley to Moab, and then all the way out to here in western Colorado where I'm at right now. My average fuel economy for a trip like that, of course, in a lot of different driving conditions, a lot of different elevations, I believe I'm averaging about 16.5 to 17.5 miles per gallon, which is pretty dang good, especially given the weight of this van, that new turbo system, all of the add-ons that I have on the inside of the van, adding a little bit more weight to it. This thing is definitely getting better gas mileage than my older van. Now, of course, in the future, I'm going to be doing bigger wheels, tires, and suspension, so I will probably take a little bit of a hit there, but then again, the speedo is going to be off, the miles are going to be off, so when I cross that bridge, I will come back to you guys and let you know what the updated miles per gallon is going to be. So far, it has been pretty great with this van. And now for the final piece, how does the all-wheel drive handle other situations outside of snow and on-road driving? My van currently does have the stock suspension like I just mentioned, so I haven't been able to fully test it to the max of its capabilities because I know the limits of stock suspension on a van like this. The trail that I'm currently on right now has a lot of silty, sandy, rocky areas, and it's nothing super crazy. Most vehicles can get to a point like this, but so far, no tire slippage, any kind of uneven surface if I'm stepping up or stepping down a little bit of rocks. This thing just handles it. There's no grinding with the all-wheel drive system that I've noticed in the past with some Subarus when taking them off-road. I still have a lot more testing to do with this thing, hitting different trails and really getting it off-road. But again, a van like this is not for rock crawling. It's really just to get you out into places like I'm in right now, to get off the beaten path and to keep you comfortable while doing it. So everything I've encountered so far, a little bit of mud, a little bit of sandy situations like this. The all-wheel drive system has been handling it pretty damn well, but in the future, when I have that upgraded suspension and I know I can push the van a little bit further, then we will be able to truly test out how the all-wheel drive does, and I'm pretty curious to see how it goes. Like I mentioned in the beginning, with the four-wheel drive, if you get stuck, you have 2 fallback plans there before you jump into recovery gear. With the all-wheel drive, you're just pushing it until eventually you get stuck, and then you have to jump straight to recovery gear. So it's kind of interesting. Let me know what you guys think about the four-wheel drive versus the all-wheel drive, especially if you have driven both. I, of course, have experience with both of them now, and I can't really pick a favorite until I know how this thing does on some gnarlier trails. But so far, I'm very happy with the Storyteller Classic all-wheel drive. It is an absolute blast to drive. The power delivery is great, and I'm stoked to really put it to the test here in the next couple of weeks. So that is all that I had for today. If you guys have any questions about the four-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive systems, maybe I missed something in this video, let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer anything as best as possible. And if you are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe because I make new videos every single week. As always, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.